Radio check, anybody copy? Uvla loatak. Hello, everybody. I'm Alice Cunniglen, and this is part 2 of episode 8, Raised in the Village, on Coffee and Quaq. Coffee and Quaq is a podcast I created to celebrate and explore contemporary native life in urban Alaska. This episode features Dr. E.J. Ramos David and his experience growing up in Utqiagvik, Alaska. It's part 2 of an exploration into the non-native experience in rural communities. What was life like for our non-native community members? When did they feel included? When did they feel excluded? Perhaps we can learn a few things about ourselves from their experiences. Sometimes I have people questioning me and my intentions as a native from Utqiagvik. Sometimes I even question myself. But one thing that always keeps me grounded in the work that I do is that no one can ever take away my upbringing and connection to Utqiagvik. That is mine, and that is a pillar to who I am today. Likewise, no one can ever take that away from anyone else brought up in a rural village. As a community, what kinds of things can we be proud of? What kinds of things should we work on? These were some of the questions I had for this episode. I started my discussion with EJ with a few rapid-fire questions to get our head in the game. Well, thank you again for agreeing to come. I really appreciate it. And so I have a couple of rapid-fire questions just to get like our ears going.
Fire, okay.
Yeah, so we can kind of get to know you on a different level. Okay, so you can only pick one. Now? Yes, we're recording. Okay. We're recording. Okay, good. We're on. Mic is hot. Okay, so coffee or Quaq?
Coffee.
Okay. Apple or Android?
Android? Like the phone?
Yeah.
Oh.
Apple.
I use an Apple.
Okay. Sunny and windy or overcast and warm?
Sunny and windy.
Okay. Four-wheeling or snow machining?
Four-wheeling.
Tang or Kool-Aid?
Ooh, Kool-Aid.
Yes, I like it. Okay, caribou or salmon?
Oh, man, that's tough. Salmon.
Okay.
Yeah. Blueberries
or salmon berries?
Blueberries.
All right. Well, now we know what kind of native you are. Good to know.
Well,
oh my goodness.
I mean, it's not like I don't like the other ones. I like the other ones too.
Yeah, but I mean, you had to choose one.
Yeah.
Now we know.
So, my name is EJ David. I was born in the Philippines. Okay. And it wasn't until I was 14 years old when I moved to the United States and, in Alaska more specifically. And I moved to Alaska. I moved to Utqiagvik, Barrow, Alaska. So it was very different for me. I grew up, in the Philippines, I grew up in a place where I grew up in the Metro Manila area. And, it's a very crowded city with millions and millions and millions of people. The Philippines itself is like 100 million people. Wow. And it's, crowded, hot, humid, right? It's a tropical island place, right? And so I went from, a large, crowded, tropical city to Utqiagvik, a town of about 4,500 people. The only way in and out is by airplane, right?
Yeah, that's a big change.
Very little concrete, right, compared to where I came from.
Yeah.
So it was a huge change in many ways for me. People talk about like the lack of sun or the temperature and all of that as the most noticeable differences between the two places that I just described here, but. To me as a child, those didn't really matter. I didn't feel too cold. I didn't really get bothered by the sunlight or whatever. To me, it was the culture. It was the culture that I noticed the most. So,
like a culture shock?
Yeah, I guess you can say that.
Yeah.
Shock. most of the times when people say culture shock, what they mean are, they see the differences between the two cultures, right? This is what I'm used to, and now there's something that I'm not used to. And I felt that a little bit, but because the Philippines also was colonized by the United States for a very long time, I was quite familiar with American culture already, to some extent. I was able to speak English quite well. I went to school in the Philippines where, English was the language used for instruction. So I was very familiar with English and with the American culture. So it wasn't culture shock in the typical sense. It was culture shock in the sense that I saw, the New Quaq people as being still very connected to their culture. And, really immersed in it and so proud about it and their language, and I wasn't. And so to me, it was like, that was the difference that I noticed primarily. It was like, how come they don't want to just be as American as I do? You know what I mean? Like, how come they don't want to assimilate like me as I've assimilated? So it was kind of like...
So you're Googleable.
Yeah.
And you've written 2 books.
Yeah.
Right. So is the first one Brown Skin, White Minds?
Yes.
That's your first book?
Yes.
And then the second one, and these are just the 2 that I know. You probably do. You have more?
I have 4.
Oh, 4. Okay. Okay. They didn't say that on Google, but they got these 2.
Okay.
And we have not stopped trembling yet, which I've heard really great things about. Yeah. So you're Googleable and you've written multiple books. But more importantly, you are a Barrow High School alumni.
Yes, I am.
Yes. Go Whalers.
Are you?
Yes, I am.
There you go.
Yes. So
yeah. No, I had great experiences in Barrow. Yeah. In Utqiagvik and then with Barrow High School. Barrow High School provided me with a lot of opportunities. I played basketball for the Whalers, and that's probably the highlight of my time there. I was and still am in love with basketball. And that provided me with many opportunities because not only was I able to see different parts of the state, different rural areas in the state, but also got to travel to the cities, playing basketball. Developed friendships, relationships. I learned a lot from the game. Cool. Those are great experiences.
What are some of your favorite memories growing up in Barrow?
Besides basketball? It's always the friends. You know what it is. I mean, it's high school. So to this day, I'm still connected to a lot. Some, not, I hope more, but some of the good friends that I developed, relationships that I developed in high school. So those are my best memories. I can't really go into the details of what those memories are. It's really one of the things that I'm most thankful for is that I grew up in a time when we did not have cameras on our phones and that we did not have social media yet.
Yeah, so that's good. I mean, you're lucky. Speak for yourself.
Yes.
Just kidding. But yeah, I know that there's a strong Filipino presence in Barrow or Calvik. Yeah. And I grew up with it too, and that was a huge driving factor for this conversation, for this episode, because, I would go to Eskimo dances or ari, and then I would also go to Filipino parties. And I enjoyed both of them, and so that's kind of what prompted this. Is I kind of wanted to. We have these conversations about being Native and about being from Barrow, and it's kind of like synonymous almost, But if you're from the village or if you're from rural Alaska, then you're probably Native. But that's not the case for a lot of people, and so I kind of wanted to kind of pick that apart a little bit and see where non-natives or natives feel included or excluded with one, like where do those circles intersect? You know what I mean? And so
no, I think it's a very important conversation to have. And I think Barrow is a great place to center that conversation on, primarily because, as you mentioned, it's a very diverse place, and it's a surprisingly diverse place. I think many people who are not from Barrow, don't know how diverse Barrow is.
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned Filipinos being one of the, groups there, but you have Samoans, you have Hawaiians, right? You have Koreans, you have a lot of people.
Yeah.
And, for me, as a Filipino person, and not just as a Filipino American person, but as an immigrant, I think there's a lot of my experiences in Barrow, but even after Barrow, that I think I can share with you. But to be able to do that, I need to contextualize it a little bit. So Filipinos really have a pretty long history in Alaska. Obviously not as long as the indigenous peoples of Alaska, but Filipinos have been in Alaska and working in Alaska since the early 1900s, right? And the reason for that is because of colonialism. So the Philippines, was a colony of the United States. And because of that, many Filipinos ended up moving to the United States to work. First, in the fields of Hawaii and California, Washington, and then many of them ended up moving up to Alaska to work in the canneries in Alaska. And then Barrow, with the oil, right? With the oil boom, it opened up a lot of jobs. And I think that's what, attracted a lot of different people from different parts of the world to move to Barrow. And that's how I found my way up there. My father and my uncles were the first ones to move to Barrow from different states because of jobs. And I ended up following them there. So, to me, as you said, where do these circles intersect? I think even though we are very different peoples, from different parts of the world, I think one of the bigger intersecting circles for us is our relationship with the United States. With really United States imperialism and how the United States have grown and have acquired different, I guess, quote unquote, properties and territories in different parts of the world. Many people might be familiar with how it acquired Alaska, right? But not as many people are familiar with how it also acquired Samoa and Guam and Puerto Rico and the Philippines. And I think that's probably one of the biggest common circles that we share together. And because of that, I think there are similar struggles between, the different communities that we represent. And because of that, it has similar consequences and similar implications, as different as our communities might be for our health, for, education, for our well-being in general. So, yeah.
Okay. No, it's an interesting point. I remember you said that. I also went to the Social Justice Summit, and I heard you speak over there, and I didn't realize the long history of Filipinos, especially in Alaska. I mean, let alone in the U.S. But like in Alaska, and I was like, whoa. I mean, it kind of blew my mind how closely related that was, and I never really thought. I never really thought why so many different people moved up to Barrow. It never really occurred to me. I never had that like introspection about it.
Sure, and I mean today, I think that should be one of the more important questions that we, not just in Alaska, but in the country, should be asking ourselves is, why are so many people wanting to move here? It's not like people just wake up one day, having that desire to move to the U.S.
To leave their homeland.
Yeah. We don't have like I want to move to the United States gene.
Yeah, right.
Right. So something happened in our homelands, historically and contemporarily today, that makes so many people want to move.
How would you say growing up in Utqagvik and the community there influenced who you are today?
As I mentioned earlier, I owe a big part of who I am today to the Barrow community. It's impacted me in so many different ways. I can talk about two ways real quick. One of the ways that it impacted me is that, one, it woke me up to how colonialism has damaged me and my people. I alluded to this earlier during the introduction. One of the things that I noticed immediately was how come I did not love, and how come I was not as proud of my culture and my heritage, as much as, other folks were. And, to me, my experience